where 29,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israel with the backing of the US and other Western countries and the silence of most other nations who might otherwise represent justice. This includes over 12,000 or 1% of all children living in Gaza, where schools no longer exist in building materials, where 360,000 houses at least have been destroyed, where hospitals and paramedics en route to vital assistance are bombed, where creators and writers and weavers and home chefs have been brutally murdered by a steep escalation of a 75-year occupation. That number will only rise as 1.3 million Gazans are facing catastrophic levels of famine and other crises. What haunts me in my own personal grief is the fact that so many of these inconceivably large numbers of people are still under rubble, their families unable to mourn them as traditions dictate. What this unending reality has incited are mass resistance movements across the globe at every level that institutions and even simple interactions operate. Those of us here have engaged our families, our communities, our schools, workplaces, local officials, federal officials, the president, corporate CEOs, arts foundations, labor unions, sports federations, and the list goes on and on and on. Not to mention the actual individual Zionists repeating racist and murderous propaganda who have threatened, doxed, and harassed us. We are here today to bear witness to one slice of that massive surge in movement toward Palestinian liberation. The experiences of 4 incredible student activists from across the CSU system, whose powerful movement work for a free Palestine has been silenced, suppressed, and assailed. I find their work to be an endless source of inspiration, proof positive that the revolutionary spirit, or spirits if you're so inclined, of Palestinian martyrs are with us after all. I hope we learn from these students and figure out new ways to shift our institutions, to foment more of the resistance they present and represent in this shattered world. So with that, I'll pass it along to John.
Thank you, Akhila. So before I kick it over to Sang, who will speak to a recent incident at San Jose State University, I will go ahead and read the land acknowledgement and the interruption statement for our union, California Faculty Association. I will share my screen so you can see it. I'm reading from our local statements, ultimately, that are for my campus at Channel Islands. So, and if you can find the labor acknowledgement, which we don't have at our campus, I'll read that too, or we can wait. Land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we gather as the California Faculty Association, and specifically the PAM Caucus and friends here on the traditional land of the indigenous people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit as well. To recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. It's important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside on the land and to seek to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements don't exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. Acknowledging the lands is an important indigenous protocol that we are honoring here today. And I will just jump into this interruption statement. As part of our continuing commitment to racial justice work, when we experience examples of racial narratives, racism, or whiteness in our meetings, or as we conduct our business, we'll address it. This means we can interrupt the meeting and draw the issue to one another's attention. We'll do this kindly with care and in good faith. Further, as we engage interruptions, we'll take an intersectional approach, reflecting the fact that white supremacy and racism operate in tandem with interlocking systems of oppression of colonialism, capitalism, class, cis heteropatriarchy, and ableism. This statement is a reminder that we commit to do this in the service of ending the system of racial oppression. All righty. So with that, Akhila, I don't know if you were able to pull up that labor. Yeah, you want to go ahead and read that?
Sure. Angel Marie, I sent it to you by chat. Do you want to read it?
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. This is going to be our labor and life affirmation acknowledgement. So I'll take a deep breath. We pay homage to those who were stolen from Africa, placed in bondage, falsely named as chattel, forced into labor and were called slaves, but never submitted as such, who have always been fully human, with an unbroken connection to the divine and to each other. We honor our African ancestors for the still unpaid labor which built what is now the Americas. Deep breath in. To both our indigenous and African forebears, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation and reparations, for it is only through freedom and justice that we truly give honor. Ashe. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel Marie. Thank you, Akhila. I will now pass it over to Sang Keel, who is one of our co-chairs of the Palestine Arab and Muslim Caucus of the CFA. She will share with us her personal experience from 2 days ago, Monday, I believe, at San Jose State University, where we unfortunately, our allies, our co-conspirators were assaulted and harassed because of their activism in line with the movement for justice in Palestine. So go ahead and take it away, Sang.
Okay, so on November 4th, 2023, Robert Ovitz, who is a fellow CFA member at my campus, and I wrote a letter to the CFA SJSU Executive Board, as well as CCing the CFA President Toombs, because we were requesting that our e-board and our union sanction Professor Jonathan Roth because he was quoted in the Spartan Daily, which is our campus student newspaper, basically equating my student group. I'm the faculty advisor for Students for Justice for Palestine at San Jose State University, and equating them with terrorists. And I found that to be libel and slanderous. And so I joined my fellow union member, Robert Ovitz, to implore our union, both at the statewide and at the local level, to sanction Jonathan Roth for the health and safety risks that he posed to our students who were simply exercising their right to free speech around expressing their discontent and their anger around the genocide that was happening in Gaza. A little backstory for Jonathan Roth. So we go way back, unfortunately, because I've been a long time pro-Palestinian activist on my campus. And so he definitely devolves into personal ad hominem attacks at individual faculty with serious viciousness. So this was one of his passive aggressive digs at me, where he didn't like something that I said on the faculty forum at San Jose State University. So basically he was telling me that Asians were white people as a way to harm and try to psychologically destabilize me, which did not work. I did inform the campus of this, and they did nothing. Here's another example that happened in 2021, where on another thread, he made claims that I supported the Taliban because I support terrorists in general. Again, he's making this equation that because I support Palestine, that I'm a supporter of terrorists all over the world. So this was me calling him out and saying, are you accusing me of supporting the Taliban? And this is also me calling out my fellow union members that were on the thread who stayed silent as I was being libeled and defamed by this person. And the theme here is our faculty union's silence and complicity around these types of attacks against not only our students, but also faculty. So this was the original flyer that was promoted by our campus, not just the Jewish Studies Department, but by our campus. And so this was the call out about this particular speaker and his problematic viewpoints. He attacks students who stick up for Palestine, as well as, denied that what was happening in Gaza was a genocide. And so this was something that was circulated on social media. So the night before the talk, so this was Sunday night, I did email the co-sponsors. So it was the Department of English and Comparative Literature at San Jose State University, the Department of History, which Jonathan Roth has an appointment, a professorship appointment, and then also the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which is a major administrative office on our campus that has the purview of dealing with anything that's related to diversity, equity, inclusion. And so here I am basically telling them that this is a bad person and who espouses terrible viewpoints, and that they should withdraw their co-sponsorship before it's too late. So here are some things that were pulled off of social media, just to give you a kind of a glimpse of the things that happened. If someone can drop in the chats, I'm so sorry, I had to prepare this at the last minute, but I do think there's video of it as well. But basically what happened is that Jonathan Roth, I think, got a copy of my email, which riled him up. And so he came down to maybe confront the students. And he was walking down the hallway. So we crowded the hallway outside the classroom. So initially what happened is that it was a public event in MLK Library, Martin Luther King Library at San Jose State. And MLK Library is one of those unique libraries that is a public space. So it's not just a university space, but it's also a San Jose city space. So he was going to have a public lecture at the library, which is a public space. And I think they got wind of what the student activists wanted to do. And so they moved it into a quote unquote private classroom. And I use quotes because in my mind, the whole university is a public university. So this whole private classroom thing, I think, is a little problematic. But basically what they did was they used someone's classroom for him to do his speech in. So they had a police presence at the door, and they were only letting people who are enrolled in the class come in. And so what we did is we gathered outside this classroom, and we took up the hallway, but we made a little skinny space in between so that students could still come and go from their classes, and we didn't block any of the doors. But we crowded in as much as we could, basically, because we planned to disrupt the speaker, and we did. So we made a lot of noise, and we did a lot of chants, and we made it very hard and impossible for the speaker to continue. And so Jonathan Roth shows up at the scene. He's walking down the narrow clearing in between. I was watching him because I know that he's, in my opinion, unhinged. And so I saw him grab a student who was using her hand to block him from recording her, and twist her hand, like wrist this way, which is very painful. I don't know if you've ever had your wrist twisted in an opposite direction. It's very it hurts. And then a couple students tried to defend her, and then the police piled on those students, and so a little melee happened because of the actions of this particular in my opinion, unhinged professor. And so here's just a little bit about the speaker, some of the problematic viewpoints that he has. Again, you can go on social media. There's a lot of different perspectives about why this person is a problematic speaker for our campus to be hosting. So this is a statement by the woman that was assaulted by Roth, and I'll just quickly read it. I was standing on the wall with everyone else, and then saw him angrily whispering things and shaking his head and walking down the hall towards the people on my left side. So I stayed close behind him to ensure he doesn't attack any of the students, at which point I see him taking out his phone and facing the students on my left sitting on the ground. I put my hand out to block the faces of the protesters from having their pictures taken of them without consent. He abruptly turned his camera into my face, and I put my hand out, not touching him or his phone, and he reached out and grabbed my hand, twisting it down and my arm. My hand is currently in pain and feels weak. After I got over the initial shock of being in the moment, I came to realize that my left hand, which he had violently twisted, was reddened and swollen compared to my right hand. I became concerned that the injury could be worse than I originally thought. After this, my friends tried to comfort and walked with me to the cafeteria, where I got an ice pack and wrapped my hand with it while sitting down for about an hour before going to get a second ice pack for my hand. Despite this, my hand was hurting me even more in that period of time and continues to hurt me now. I already didn't feel safe on this campus, given that they felt it was okay to invite a speaker who justifies the genocide of my people. But now I feel even more unsafe as well, concerned for the safety of students on campus and faculty after being violently assaulted by the department head of the history department, who I've since learned has a history of harassing pro-Palestinian voices on campus, including me. So here's a little QR code. Activists, Students for Justice for Palestine and other student groups are clearly organizing around this particular faculty member, demanding that he be fired. We did receive an email from the campus president saying that, without naming him, saying that he was put on leave, but we can be safe to assume that he's been put on leave. There was a demand for his arrest too, since many witnesses saw him attack, the Palestinian activist. And so we're very much trying to spread the word, organize students, faculty, staff, community members, other campuses, everybody, because we need justice in this particular case. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Sang. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's very recent and ripe in your mind and in the minds of those who experienced that over there. Right. We had hoped that no such incidents occurred in the weeks leading up to this panel, but I think there's a reason to say that we're not really that surprised. As Sang showed you, there's been a history of documented abuse and harassment by this professor at SJSU, and the university and other structures, institutions that are supposed to do things about these have remained silent or done nothing. This is one of the first times that, and I'm just now hearing that he's likely on leave. So that's good, but hopefully it's not just a way for them to sweep this under the rug and let him back in when the tension sort of eases a bit.
So I just want to add one clarification. He's on paid leave.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, that's a paid vacation. So that's not punishment. That's not accountability. That's just giving him his paycheck, and he doesn't have to teach or do service or duties or anything else of the nature. So it's the tiniest of first steps, but still, I think, in my mind, a paid vacation.
Yes, well put. Thank you for that clarification. So with that, we have one more thing before we get to our students. We will kick it to our students after I read a bit of, let's call it a speech, on not staying silent and on the importance of these things and on interconnections between this movement for justice in Palestine and various other liberation movements. I'm going to mute you, Saying. I'm not sure if that was you, but I'm going to
mute all and then unmute yourself.
All right. You didn't get muted, but I'll mute you. I got it. It's good. All right. So again, let me first introduce myself. My name is John Caravello. I am a instructor in philosophy at Cal State Channel Islands. We are over here in Camarillo, California, just north of Los Angeles. And we are one of the smaller campuses here, but we are also one of the one of the campuses with a chapter of SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, a newly created chapter. I'm very proud of that. So I'll just launch into it now. So in 2020, we saw the biggest social uprising in history. a response to the ever-worsening racist policing in the United States. Since the Black Lives Matter protests against police brutality and the direct call to reimagine and reconstruct our country's policing that came with the uprising, police killings are higher than they've ever been. Policing has been funded even more, surveillance has been cranked up, and the hegemonic narrative has been reinforced. University campuses are no different. Police brutality has not let up. Funding for university police departments has steadily increased in the last decade, and the same rhetoric is still in full effect. So, as a result of the racial reckoning and largest uprising in human history, we have seen an increase to police funding, an increase in surveillance, and symbolic gestures like changes in how we describe the racist police institutions in this country, things like compassionate policing. Also, symbolic gestures that do nothing to alleviate the root causes of oppression, things like painting Black Lives Matter on the street. During the uprisings, we dealt with a worldwide pandemic where the richest of the rich increased their collective wealth by billions, if not trillions, proportional to the loss in wealth of the most vulnerable of us. Such has made worse the effects of the already out of control climate crisis, supercharging migration around the world, including here in the United States. Nations in the global South are hit hardest, and in the global North, communities in the worst socioeconomic conditions have been hit the hardest. Our institutions have simply played into the status quo with a combination of fear-mongering, anti-Blackness, xenophobia, and Islamophobia, fueling violence against migrants around the world, letting them drown in the sea, carrying out extrajudicial killings, and imprisoning them in concentration camps at the border. As migrants from the global South are facing the worst oppressive forces of this world, racism, imperialism, and colonialism, a destined to fail racist, imperialist, settler colonial conquest is being perpetrated against Palestine and the Palestinians. Settlers, however, are not migrants. Whether they are forcibly removing Palestinians and stealing their homes, developing in lands surrounding Arab enclaves, or pushing to build settlements on the recently flattened Gaza, they are directly complicit in war crimes, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. And the United States has been the largest funder of this genocide. Our tax money, our public institutions, our media apparatus have been funding and fueling the ugly, racist, genocidal Zionist project. But the academy is different, right? Here in higher education, we know history. We care for human rights, and we're educators. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. As it's currently constituted, the university is merely an arm of the larger imperialist monster that is the United States. Its purposes is to reinforce the hegemonic power structures that rule the world, whether by directly contributing funds and resources to the dominant capitalist structures, or by pushing for incremental reformism to change the master's house with the master's tools from the inside. After the largest uprising in history in 2020, university campuses chose to respond to the racial reckoning with what? Increased funding for police, racist time, place, and manner policies to mitigate disruptions, and vapid diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Oh, and they also increased tuition. With surface level promises to build more spaces centered on empathy, we get nothing in the way of actual changes to our material conditions, only platitudes about how real change comes with a change in the way we treat each other. But just like the corporation, who tells us to recycle more to do our part in the fight against climate change while actively contributing the amount of 10 million people's carbon emission each month, the university that tells us to love each other more while actively funding Lockheed Martin and basically every other weapons manufacturer in this country is exactly the sort of gaslighting we should expect of our current institutions. Their solution, shift the responsibility onto the people. The real solution, change the fucking systems. The working class people of this world are not at fault. It is the ultra-rich and the institutions they control who are at fault as they steer the resources away from the majority, the people, us, and into their own hands. No more, All empires fall. We're at an inflection point and we will not be silenced. We will win. The California State University has kept ties with Israeli universities with their study abroad programs. CSU administrators are quick to send out messaging about increases in anti-Semitism, but silent on the structural oppression against Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims, not to mention any other of our more vulnerable kinds of classes of people. Their actions and their silence have contributed to the increasing violence against and harassment of PAM campus community members and anyone who speaks up for justice in Palestine or the movement associated with it. What has been their response in light of the movement for justice in Palestine? How do they treat their students? Most of you already know the answer. I want you to really ask yourself, are we surprised? Most importantly, though, how will we keep each other safe as we continue to fight for what we know is right? So without further ado, I would like to introduce our students. I will let them introduce themselves, actually. I'll kick it over to Angel Marie first. They will now share their experiences of harassment and suppression for their contribution to the movement for justice in Palestine. Go ahead and take it away, Angel Marie.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you to the amazing PAM Caucus again for putting this event together. And thank you to everyone who was able to make it. And if you're watching a recording of this afterwards, thank you for tuning in. My name is Angel Marie, pronoun she, they, she. I go to the CSU Channel Islands campus and I'm a senior there. I have been working as an organizer since I was 18. I'm 22 now, so it's not that long, just about 4 years. But something unique about my organization, I'm a community organizer as well as a student organizer. So as I go through my experiences today, I'm going to be dabbling back and forth between the two to give y'all some perspective on the retaliation and suppression that I have faced in my time organizing. The first off, I wanted to first announce the topics that I will be covering as I go through. I do have some pictures and videos I will be sharing along the way. The way I'm breaking it down, I'm first going to address community organizing versus academic organizing. Then I'm going to dive into the topic of surveillance, then the time, place, and manners policy that we all love so much. Secondly, more intense forms of retaliation, such as disenrollment. Then I'm going to move into admin negligence, both within the CSU system and even within surprising other spaces as well. And lastly, diving into the overall message I really want to convey to the space today. It does not matter what topic you are organizing, advocating around, they will suppress you if you as a student are successful at it. I've come to find out the hard way. So starting off with community organizing versus academic organizing. As I mentioned, I do community organizing and academic organizing. And because of that, especially because I am a Black individual, I am subjected to police harassment no matter where I go. In the community as well as on campus, it's a thing for me and it's honestly terrorizing. And I wanted to share some visuals to help prove that point. This is one of many. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. So as you can see here on the screen, first I should probably check, can everyone see this okay? No?
It's still black.
Still
So-
loading.
Yeah, it's loading.
Okay. Awesome. Can y'all see this video now?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So even though it's a really short video, pretty much what you see in this video, I was on my way home from campus. It's like a 10-minute drive, not long at all. But because of my community organizing, I'm actually on the police watch list. No, I have not committed any crime. I've never engaged in any form of escalation whatsoever. But because I'm constantly engaging in these active community spaces, I'm always tailed home whenever I'm leaving from the store, leaving from campus. And on this particular commute, I happened to blow a tire and I pulled off on the side of the street, and you can see visibly that my tire is literally exploded. It's missing. I had the cops who were tailing me pull me over, which I was already pulled over because the exploded tire, and they didn't believe that my tire exploded. And they pursued to, as you can see, go underneath my car, open up all my doors, my entire trunk, go inside and thoroughly check my vehicle, which we all know is illegal, but I'm by myself, I'm feminine presenting, I'm Black, it's a dangerous situation. And that's why the video itself is so short, because I had to sneak it while he wasn't looking because I didn't feel safe. I was very scared. But this is documentation. So this is just a bit of some of the police harassment I experienced that comes with my community organizing. And then I wanted to jump into how I also experienced police harassment in student organizing. And to your surprise, it's actually worse on campus than it is in the community at large. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. Campus policing is worse for people of color than it is in the community. And I'm going to share some visuals to go along with that. So let me know if y'all can see my screen okay. So again, this is one of many. This is me in broad daylight in a parking lot. Again, it's really short when I'm taking these videos, whenever I'm pulled over being harassed by police. I'm like trying to sneak it because like, again, I'm not feeling safe and normally I'm by myself. I'm almost always by myself, which I believe to be intentional. But what happened in here, I hadn't even left the parking lot and I was pulled over by the police for having a broken taillight. We can all clearly see in this video, it's in broad daylight. There's no way you can tell my taillights are broken because the taillights aren't on. And I couldn't even leave the parking lot. So every single time I go onto campus, at least once a week, I am confronted or pulled over by the police, whether it be in my car on my way to class. I have literally had campus police show up where my classes are before they start just to ask where I'm going, playing nonchalant, playing coy. But we all know it's because I'm under surveillance for my campus organizing. In just fall 2023, just last semester, I was pulled over by campus police 17 times. And that's just in one semester. So if you do the math, that's literally me getting pulled over by campus police once a week. I already experienced so much pushback and retaliation for the organizing work that I do for my campus, whether it be changing campus policy, influencing state legislation, my organizing, like it ranges. There's
Angel Marie, you froze.
so much. I'll still hear me okay?
Now we
Oh.
can.
Awesome, cool. What was the last thing we heard, just so I make sure I didn't leave out any information? No, just gonna jump back
I
in.
don't know. Just keep going. You're good.
Okay, just gonna jump back in. Thank you. There's so much that comes with LRA, but in addition to that, for me to experience literal terror in my day-to-day experience that I already have to experience off campus, but for it to be worse or on, it definitely discourages students from going to school, which is a problem because this is the CSU. It's a college. All we're here to do is to go to school, is to get our education. There are literal active barriers against us in doing that. And that's intentional. The next thing I want to dive into would be surveillance. As I mentioned earlier, the campus police have notoriously followed me around to my classes. They also follow me around in any formal space that I am on campus. This includes our ASI. If you're not familiar with Associated Students Incorporated, it's the formally recognized student voice of the CSU system. So whenever they host any meetings, it's all documented. There are agendas, there are minutes, and whenever we as student organizers are pushing for campus policy, campus reform, we have to attend these spaces. So every single time I am attending these spaces, I am followed, and I do have copies of the agendas and the minutes to prove that as well. I go ahead and share my screen here. Let me know if y'all can see this okay. It's loading. Perfect. So this is a copy of one of the minutes from a formal ASI student government space. I highlighted the date. This is from October 20, 2022, and you see my name here listed as one of the members of the public. I regularly started attending these meetings because it's important for me to represent all the students behind me in these spaces because they're not very accessible. And I started attending them regularly. In fact, in the fall semester of 2022, I didn't miss a single student government meeting. I was at every single one. And as you can see here, other members of the public are just folks at large, students at large. If we go forward here just 2 weeks later, you can see that also attending members of the public, the other two names I highlighted is Drake Massey and Chris Jensen. These are the chief of police and vice chief of police on my campus. What is the chief of police doing in an ASI student government meeting? Nothing but literally surveilling me. So you can go through the agenda and the minutes and visibly see the paper trail of when the surveillance in these specific settings started for me. And I have a few more following that up. Continuing with these next meetings, you can see I'm also on the roster. Here, it's not the chief of police. This time, it's Cindy Derrico. Cindy Derrico at CSU Channel Islands is the Dean of Student Affairs. She oversees all of student conduct. If you can see here in these previous meetings, she's not present. The Dean of Students never comes to these meetings. It's not part of protocol. Tidbit of information, I also used to serve in student government as the Chief Justice, and that job pretty much entails that I know all the bylaws. So I'm very familiar with the formal structure. There is nowhere in the structure that the Dean of Students should be present in these meetings. But as you can see here, she, as well as the campus police on my campus, started attending just to monitor quite literally everything that I said and did. Even if I didn't say or do anything, they would take note of that too. And this is just, again, another example, November 16th, like all the way out through the semester. There have been times in this past semester in fall where I didn't sign up for student government in advance. So my name didn't appear in any roster. And I unexpectedly decided to join. So I walked in and immediately all of the campus admin who were already in that room texted Cindy Derrico, and she came rushing in 5 minutes after I came in saying, sorry, I'm late, when we all know she didn't have any intention of going because, again, I wasn't present. And this isn't true for just me. This is also a unfortunate, really sad, dark reality for other student organizers on my campus. And I just wanted to give y'all some insight to what surveillance on students can look like. It could formal settings, driving around if you're a commuter, going to your classrooms. It's a wide range, unfortunately, and it's not just one entity. It's not just the police. It's not just the dean of students. It's anyone and everyone that they can possibly send in on you. The next thing I want to dive into, kind of segueing surveillance to time, place, and manner. As I just mentioned, whenever I am being surveilled, they take extremely detailed notes on everything I say and do. And I wanted to share my screen really quick. Just this past fall at CSUCI, student organizers, including myself, put together a campus protest to oppose the tuition increase approval that had just been submitted, a completely non-political, non-controversial topic. And this is Cindy Derrico. She attends all of the campus protests that I put on with like a large hat and large glasses, like appearing to be incognito mode, even though we all clearly know it's her. And this is just one of 11 pages of detailed notes that she took on everything that happened. And if you're seeing the screen here, you can see that whenever I even cross the street and I sit on a sidewalk, she wrote down how many minutes I was standing at that sidewalk. And of course, I can't let like intense surveillance like this break me down. I understand the work that I do is important, the work that I do is successful, and the work I do is vital. But to be transparent with the space, it is absolutely terrorizing to know that I'm having someone stalk me to this degree. Like she literally wrote down how many minutes I was standing on a sidewalk and whenever we moved. And I also want to use this piece of documentation to go into the next topic, time, place, and manner. We all know that every campus is supposed to have a time, place, and manner policy, but they intentionally leave out consequences for students who violate the policy, very broad and very loose, so they can manipulate the policy to apprehend and retaliate and suppress students however they see fit. As I mentioned, this page is one of 11 of very detailed stalker notes from this campus protest, including all the different things that our students so bravely spoke about in their speeches, from campus housing to lower tuition to HR issues. We had an entire segment dedicated just to Palestinian solidarity. And that's not in the surveillance notes at all. So not only are these stalker notes so overly detailed and so violating, they're also not accurate. She can pick and choose what she includes in these notes and what not to include in these notes. And she intentionally decided to leave out everything we did in that protest that day for Palestine solidarity. And that's really, really, really important because it attaches to the overarching message of time, place, and manner policy. It's BS. They will use it any way that they can against you. On my campus specifically, the campus protests we had the fall before this one, they tried to charge us with a violation on the policy for illegal flyering, not using the free speech zone areas, and myself and my faculty, supporters, shout out John, John's here in the call, sat in a meeting with her and pushed back against these charges, and it took 4.5 hours, a 4.5 hour long meeting with the Dean of Student Affairs to push back against it, and ultimately we won. All the charges were dropped because they were bullshit to begin with, excuse my language, but that's literally what it is. So time, place, and manner policy, you're definitely going to see this come up a lot, and it is a huge, huge tool that admin will use to suppress student voices. I am now going to dive into some more intense versions of retaliation, such as disenrollment. I swear, it's like it couldn't get worse, but it gets worse. I was disenrolled from CSU Channel Islands in response to the organizing work that I was doing around, again, the tuition increase. This is something totally non-controversial, non-political. You increase tuition, of course, students are going to fight back and organize against that. It just so happens that we made a very detailed post on it. I'm sharing my screen here. You can find a link to it in chat. So as you can see, myself and fellow student leader who is also Black on my campus, his name is Cortland, we were both of us, the prominent faces of our organization efforts against tuition increase, accidentally disenrolled from CSU Channel Islands. And going through the post here to give y'all some details, we had a very large rally at this Board of Trustees meeting. If y'all haven't heard, there was upwards towards like 700 folks there from across the state. This was students, faculty, and staff, all advocating for many different things for the betterment of the community, for the CSU, but mostly against the tuition increase. And as you can see here on the screen, it made nationwide news, KTLA, Long Beach Post, LA Times, and if you look a little closer, you can see that my face specifically is in almost all of the viral publications, and with my face comes the name of my university. So it was such a bad look for CSU Channel Islands to have been blown up in such a disgraceful way, and their response to that was to literally disenroll myself and my fellow student organizer, Cortland. In the middle of this Board of Trustees meeting the next day when they were making the vote, he and I both received emails almost at the exact same time saying that we have been disenrolled for non-payment. Corley and I don't have any financial issues with the university. This is so left field. This was unbelievable. We honestly didn't even know how to process it. I didn't even know he received it. After this meeting, I came to him, I'm like freaking out. Like I was just disenrolled from the university. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, I'm a senior. This was supposed to be my last year. Being disenrolled in your second to last semester on a degree that you've been working on for years I was losing it. Like to be very transparent with this, I was terrified. I was scared. This has real life impacts. Like this is no shit. I just got disenrolled from my activism, and he did too. Um, we examined every single layer of this and ultimately decided that this in like 100% is retaliation because we went to admissions office, we went to registrations office, we talked to the head staff, the lower staff, we talked to everyone possible. His parents even ended up getting involved. No one could actually give us any explanation as to why we were disenrolled. They claim us for financial reasons. No one could give us any financial proof. In fact, I literally sent them screenshots of me making my payments on time months before. So the excuse was bullshit, and their defense for it was even more bullshit. So Courtland and I both reached out to the California Faculty Association, the CFA, the labor union that Pam Caucus is part of, and their specific branch, their executive board for my campus, immediately went to the campus president. Like this is unheard of. We did everything we could as students on our end. It wasn't going anywhere. At this point, Courtland and I had been out of class for almost a month. This is 3 weeks in. And for any students here in the call, you know how impactful it can be to be absent from all of your classes for almost a month, in addition to everything else we have going on. Again, I'm only sharing in this space what I'm going through as an organizer, but I'm also a person too. I had real life personal stuff happening to me at the same time, and it was just so overwhelming. It was so discouraging. But almost immediately after the CFA e-board of CI confronted campus president Yao, our enrollment was immediately reinstated. No explanation, no apology. To this day, Courtland and I still have not received an explanation nor an apology for this disenrollment. And I think it's really important for me to share my experience with disenrollment in this space because it really just shows how bold admin will be in suppressing student voices. They literally disenrolled us. There is almost nothing that goes like worse than that. Um, and again, this ties into my last point that I really wanted to make super clear to this space. The topic does not matter. All of what just the very minimum surface level details I shared with the space today is about tuition. It wasn't even about Palestine. And look at what happened. And I know that if we take this and double it and pertain it to the Palestinian spaces, it's even worse. So no matter what the topic is, if you are doing a good job at advocating around it, you're influencing the community, you're getting folks involved, they will suppress you. And that concludes my portion and sharing my experience. Were there any comments or questions from the audience? Do I kick the mic back to John?
Yeah, I mean, let's save Q&A for later and kick it over to one of your peers from SJP. If I would like to, because I was so closely tied to these cases, as Angel Marie is one of my interns for the organization Students for Quality Education, which is an organization paid with interns paid by CFA. I'm the advisor for that group at our campus. Being so closely tied to it, I'm very familiar with everything that's happened, although that's the first I'm hearing the number 17 of you being pulled over 17 times. There's a lot of weirdness, you might think, in the fact that, a lot of the stuff they were talking about at these protests, for instance, were not overtly political. I do think that they're ultimately all political, but they weren't controversial exactly. But let's not forget we did have a student speak towards Palestine, speak towards justice for Palestine at the protest this past fall. And, you are currently facing disciplinary action from the university for your contribution to that. We saw the report and the very 11-page detailed report, right, with every single thing that was mentioned except for Palestine. And that is important. It is very important. I think it is a tactic right now that is being used to sort of build this stuff out of history, not document it, right? So I do think it's important, but I would like to shift now to, not sure if or Farah would like to volunteer to speak next on their experiences.
Okay. So, oppression at Long Beach is very, I'd say, interesting because the tactic admin used to, I guess, try to, like, have kind of like illegitimate our movement, our practices, just SJP on general, is to go after our collaborating boards. Just as a fact for everyone that kind of doesn't know how SJP started on Long Beach, a lot of our members from SJP are from like other established orgs on campus. Me personally, I'm a general body member from La Fuerza and SQE, and a lot of the board on SJP is also in the same kind of like, I guess, membership. They're general body members for La Fuerza and for SQE, and a tactic or I guess something they've tried to in the past would be go after those other orgs. When the October 7th issue or tragedy happened, we organized a protest like the day of, and we made a big rally. We showed up, we made noise, we had the news there, all sorts of news outlets trying to capture the story and trying to capture what's going on. And pretty much after that, the whole campus were like blasted with emails from Jane Colony, not saying directly La Fuerza had done the protest, but they had hinted that a group on campus known for organizing these protests was responsible. And in her email specifically, she had mentioned that a group on campus had shared a flyer that was promoting violence on campus, and so that led to a chain reaction of not only the organization of La Fuerza having to kind of cease operations and kind of watch what they do. It also led to admin placing citations on us for time and placement, time and management rules. It led to even other student orgs, mainly Zionist student orgs, trying to disband us. The first time we faced disbandment was at an ASI meeting. What had happened is that one of the Fuerza Connect for ASI had mentioned us before that their Beach Halol is going to try to come in and give their piece on why they think that La Fuerza is a threat on campus. So after that, we kind of get within hours had tried to build a case to defend us and to kind of illegitimize what they're saying, protests, and Jane Colony's emails. La Fuerza's Instagram page, their website was flooded with hate comments, death threats, and just overall harassment. The main comment that made us stop completely was that someone went into the website and had sent a message saying I'm gonna have a little surprise for you guys waiting, smiley face, and then from there that kind of sparked concern, and La Fuerza, the caretakers of the Latina Resource Center, had to shut down for a day or two. We wasn't in there. There was no one in there besides just I think faculty members, our advisors were in there. Other than that, we didn't have our home, so to say. We were kind of just exiled. But going back to the ASI meeting, after we had built our case, it kind of just we had left with kind of their piece and our piece. But as we were leaving, Beach Halol someone from Beach Halol had called us terrorist, and I think just from there we were just kind of blacklisted at least on their part. Another instance that happened where they tried again targeting just collaborating groups, orgs, was when they had actually given La Fuerza a citation for time and management or time and placement policies. And basically what the I guess crimes or what we had did wrong was megahorns using during class hours, certain banner drops, or they didn't like that we were placing banners, and then apparently we were being difficult with like faculty members and workers when like they try to remove it. And just to keep in mind, one of the pieces of evidence they used to like pin us on the banner wasn't even from our campus. I think it was from like UCI. It was one from the UCs. It wasn't even on Long Beach. It was from a completely different campus, and they were still trying to pin it on us as we had done it. And basically with that was a more like drawn out, long process, because that actually involved like admin. That was actually admin coming down on us. So I forgot what day, but we went on I believe a Thursday, and we had some of the board members had went in with someone else from admin and to go like talk about the citations and basically why they shouldn't be cited and whatever. And basically that conversation went down as the banners, everyone puts up banners, La Freza didn't have any real responsibility for that because this is a resource center. Everybody's welcome to the resource center. We have supplies to make banners and to have that kind of just like community or just that kind of like resistance building. If someone wants to make a banner, they can. Like we're not gonna stop them. Anyone can come and do that. As for the megaphone, we had mentioned before that other orgs kind of used it, and that's even though it's like to use it, that's not other orgs in the past haven't been kind of real thing. They really pinned us on was the megaphone. As for the workers, we had explained that we asked pretty nicely for our banners back, and they just complied with us and left. That wasn't really like an issue, so to say. But during that conversation, the person from admin was asking, oh, so if it wasn't you guys, then who did it? And they had mentioned SJP and was trying very hard to get board members from La Fuerza to say SJP had done these movements, had done, this and that they didn't agree with. Of course, they didn't snitch, and it was kind of left for a little bit, for a while. We didn't really have an answer or kind of a response from admin. From my recollection, I believe that our org did like still receive like a mark, but like we don't know what that means. We don't know what that's going to do for future boards. They just said I think the board now currently has a mark against them. Even though that we did defend, the board did defend themselves the best they could, and the board did present a strong case to admin about that they didn't really cause any of these problems and it wasn't their responsibility. They still got marked down for that. And we heard from inside that a lot of our admin on CSU Long Beach are Zionist. Beth Lesson herself goes to Beach Hello meetings and openly supports, Israel. They have politicians, they have politicians, they have assemblymen, support Israel and support them. Jane Colony is a part of the ADL and has openly spoke against, BDS movements and just spoke it against anti-Israel sentiment in the past. She's a point. She has an award for the ADL for suppressing students and I think the main reason why one of the reasons highlighted in our article was because she spoke out against ASI divestment act, and yeah, and the our and yeah, she basically was awarded for after that was for repressing students. And so back to what I was talking about, Beth Lesson, what we heard from inside, Beth Lesson wanted to get someone in trouble, mainly SJP. She was trying to go for SJP, but being that Fuerza was tangible in that sense, kind of just gave it to them. And for student organizers, I feel like especially on Long Beach, we're all interconnected with each other. We all take a stand on intersectional solidarity, and it makes it very hard to not even organize for ourselves, but to organize other people, because we have to take into account like damage control. Which one of our orgs is going to be hit the most? Which one of our orgs are going to be ones targeted? And I think just after that, a lot of our orgs and even collaborating orgs have took a stance to be like, we got to cover our faces. We got to make sure, we conceal our identity as much as possible, because there's just a lot of, we know that Zionists on our campus here have a lot of power. They have a lot of strings to pull, and we need to be extremely careful of how we do actions and movements. Of course, we still do them. Of course, we still go out there and protest and show solidarity as much as possible. But it's just that we feel like we're under so much scrutiny and just surveillance from not only admin, but just other students on campus that feel the same way as admin do, that are also Zionist.
Most def. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing all of your experiences and your coalition's experience, and your campus's experiences with the space. I really want to point out something very specific about Karen's experience to this, to the group. As mentioned, the Student Leader Coalition at CSU Long Beach mobilized for Palestinian solidarity the day of the siege, October 7th, the day it happened. Student organizing at Cal State Long Beach is especially strong. The community is especially tight, and them being the first ones to be able to put in action towards towards Palestinian solidarity in the CSU, and then to be shut down like this so intensely. It's a very obvious case of the CSU making an example out of them. That's why they went in so hard, so irrationally, and to this day, as you heard there, now the current board has a mark on their records, and they don't even know what that means. That ties into this topic of time, place, and manner policy, and how they will bend and twist it however they see fit to repress students whenever they want to. It's such a shame that we don't know what these things mean, and when we're being passed around from department to staff trying to figure out, no one has answers, because the answer doesn't exist. It's just suppression. It's just retaliation in its most purest form. Thank you so much, Karen, again, for sharing your experience. Did you have anything else that you wanted to contribute to the group, or am I okay to pass the mic over to Farah?
So what I was saying before, students are able to post whatever they want. And where I'm going with this is that a lot of times we get a lot of just anti-Islamophobic, or we get a lot of Islamophobic propaganda, a lot of racist propaganda, most notably not too long after the October 7th siege protest, a lot of students got a newspaper from the Christian Alamo, and it basically was this whole thing that said Muslim, Arabs, and Palestinians are just animals. They're they're people of the woods. They're beasts, and there was no response from Jane Colony. There was no we didn't hear anything from the school, right? But and again, what had sparked the initial outrage from the October 7th protest, at least from Long Beach, was one of the flyers La Fuerza had posted had a paraglider, and basically that was pinned on the group as like responsibility as we made it, but that was a completely different org. I don't think anyone on Long Beach had any responsibility of creating that graphic. But it was pinned on us, and Jane Conley found that as an opportune time to like target us and pin that on us as inciting violence, when it's just twisting of words and using just racist rhetoric against us, so that they could have an excuse to say that we're violent, that we're causing trouble on campus. And what I'm trying to say is that, like, admin, especially here on our campus, because the top dogs, so to say, are just powerful Zionists. They'll do whatever it takes. They'll do whatever. They'll twist words around. Make whatever rhetoric possible to generate that consent of like disdain for groups advocating for Palestine.
Thank you. Something else that you mentioned that I want to echo, and that John put in more detail in the chat, is that also within the time, place, and manner policy, we could get in trouble for using amplified sound at a protest. It's literally a protest. So this just, again, points to one of the structural ways that the policy simply just exists to suppress students. Suppressing students from using amplified sound at a protest is literally just unrealistic. In the experience I shared earlier, this was used against us, and our protest was actually approved by the university, and we were still charged with violating for amplified sound. So there's just no way to win around the TPM. Again, it's designed to suppress student voices. Thank you so much again. I'm going to kick the mic over to Farah. Farah, were you still comfortable sharing with the space today? Speak to your experiences.
Of course. I'm going to turn my camera on.
Hi.
I can start, correct? Yes. Okay, perfect. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to have this space here to share my side of things. I also want to highlight that in CSU Sacramento, I do have comrades, in all different types of campuses across the Bay Area and Davis. And I just kind of want to give space or highlight to recognize that each one of like us campuses have all like really underwent different more or less Zionist things, and this is just one of our stories. Yeah, so let me get into it. So we started out October 12th with the National Day of Protest that National had called out for. And the news came out to film us and everything in our local Sacramento news. And we had basically told everybody to cover up their faces and really reiterated to not give up our names. Do not, if anybody asks, like, don't say who I am, don't say who they are, like nobody, right? So that was something that was really established early on to take seriously, because I had basically already known prior that a lot of the students on campus that were organizing now with SJP and other students who were just coming in solidarity did not know. And there was this huge weight to protect one's identity and face and all that to ensure doxing wasn't going to happen. And mind you, this was the early stages. So just really trying to do that risk assessment. Um, and what had happened in that protest, a little bit towards the end of it, actually, was we ended up getting a shooting threat. And there was students who had reported um, this trail called Guy West Bridge, right? It's basically like a mini Golden Gate Bridge looking thing that leads to our campus. And um, there was multiple students that had reported seeing them and then like walking away, and the police had went to investigate, and they had originally said that, oh, it was a false thing. But for us, at least, it was kind of like, well, who do we believe? The police that would like showed up hecka late and maybe just didn't see them and they dispersed at the right time, or these students who, why would they give us that false information? Especially when these were like community members of our own. So we didn't really trust the fact that the university was saying, oh, it was false things. Like it could have easily been that they didn't see them. But that was something that really freaked us out, because obviously when you get a shooting threat and a shooter is coming to campus, you're not just going to take that lightly. You got to step into action, and had everyone disperse and everything. And something that was also highlighted during that protest was there was a comrade of ours who was just kind of doing like security within the crowd, had seen somebody filming us, right? The person kind of goes to inspect, like, what are they doing? And they end up seeing them on a group FaceTime with all these soldiers who this guy on security was Palestinian and has been to Palestine. Really soldier's outfit looks like. So it just further creeped us out. Like, what is this guy doing on FaceTime with all these IDF soldiers pointing at us, pointing his phone at us? And we didn't know what he filmed. We didn't know what these IDF soldiers saw. We didn't know anything. It was, thankfully, again, at that time, like, we were very strict about everybody cover your faces if you're not like trying to take yourself seriously. Just because it's better to be safer, than sorry. Something to preface as well is that we had gone to way prior to October 7th, and we're trying to get divestment rolling. Whereas there was unanimous support, post October 7th, ended up seeing constantly with our friends in ASI that were diligently working to try and like help us out with this, because they believed, these three girls like really believed in us. And it was really this one main girl that was really helping us drive this. It basically ended up being all these ASI board members backing out. It became the ASI president not wanting to vote on it because the immigration lawyer were saying, hey, don't put your name on anything like this. We were losing votes. There was a Palestinian guy who was an immigrant from Jordan who was like, hey, I can't vote on this. Like, I don't need any issues. Like, our citizenship test is coming up. We were losing votes like crazy because of all these really serious, like, scare tactics, essentially, that, Zionism is known for. And it was back and forth with the resolution. There was administrative staff that was really just affecting the autonomous process of ASI to write a resolution that they believed in, and were basically being asked to water down things. Zionist members showed up and said that this was that the resolution was one-sided to the Palestinian community. And basically, because the stats that were all in the resolution were all facts about like occupation and death and everything to do with Palestine, basically saying that it wasn't fair that like how bad we made Israel look on the resolution, but like we can't lie about the stats. So like there was just so much pushback on things that were just so stupid that like there was no, it was just basically Zionism at its finest, essentially, and its hypocrisy, and its ego, obviously. And eventually, finally, after 3 months of back and forth, the last ASI meeting of the semester, just a couple months ago, it finally comes up to get voted on, and it ends up being passed. But something to preface to that as well is that in the meantime, while we were doing all these protests, we were also getting so many threats as well. And I constantly had students tell me, because I am the president of my SJP, and we had no way to kind of log all of this. We had no concrete space for students to come and like log all their incidents. It was essentially word of mouth to SJP members that people were getting a lot of like Islamophobia. And if a girl was wearing her hijab, then somebody would like make the shooting finger at them. And somebody was wearing a kofia, or it was just like name calling and like violence through symbolism of the hands or the mouth. It was racism. It was a lot of things like that. And so many students started feeling really uncomfortable on campus, not just for looking Muslim, but for any type of Palestinian solidarity that they did or wore. Eventually, we got to sit down with the assistant of the president of Sac State. Our new president this year is Luke Wood. And he had originally sent out an email when October 7th first happened saying like Israeli-Gaza conflict, simple blurb, like nothing compared to like what he had sent out or what previous president had sent out for Ukraine or any other minority that dealt with issues in their nation. Just it was just so half-assed, like, excuse my language, but it was just like really felt like he did not care at all. Like this was just as if it was just some duty for him to send out something, be like, hey, resources on mental health if you need it, right? And he posted something on Instagram condemning Hamas, but yet never recognizing Israel. And to me, it's like, don't send out a message to all of us. It was, don't send out a message like that. Immediately, you're letting us know that like you don't support Palestine. And if the issue was that he wasn't educated, which it ended up being that he wasn't educated, why would you as a president send stuff out without being educated on it? And so it was a huge just stab in the back for us as well, because a lot of the Palestinian community here just didn't really voice themselves until SJP basically forced them to. We felt like prior SJP, like a lot of Palestinians took a back seat. They didn't really have a space on campus. But we were a pain in the ass enough to like change some things. But he ended up, President Luke Wood ended up hosting a educational like hearing session, basically one for Palestine, one for Israel, right? And so the Palestinian one went first. He basically, what this was we get to come and tell him, he gets to hear us out, right? And we didn't really know how to feel about the separation. Yeah, it was odd, but we explained to him everything and stuff. And I basically told him, you pride yourself in Black organizing and BLM and all that. And it's very hypocritical of you to bolster yourself on this pedestal of organizing and like advocacy when and just like bolstering CSU on this pedestal of like progressiveness, but it's all hypocrisy, because if you can't connect the dots and like connect that intersectionality and have solidarity across these connected struggles, then you're a hypocrite to your own work. And I think that really stuck with him. And we ended up, a couple of us ended up staying afterwards for the Israeli session. We have an IDF soldier, an ex-IDF soldier that is a professor in the biology department. And he was saying that we need to get expelled for saying river to the sea chant. There was a woman as well who was saying like, just in front of us all, like looking straight at us as Palestinians, saying, if we wanted to flatten Gaza, don't worry, we would have done it in an hour. Just like saying a bunch of stuff to us, with the administration not doing anything to shut it down, essentially. And they let her go on and on and on, looking right at us, saying all of this really like genocidal, Zionist, maniac stuff to our faces. Eventually, they were like, lady, like, stop looking at the students. And Hillel from UC Davis ended up coming in and saying that you need to establish a Hillel and this, that. And we ended up telling the president, like, no way in hell you're going to establish a Hillel here. Like, we're trying to divest and you're over here trying to get a Hillel over. You're not using our money to send people to so-called birthright trips. It's, first of all, it's not even open access because none of the Palestinians would be able to go. Not that the Palestinians would use Hillel, but like if they can't use it, then there you go. It's not open access. And there was just a lot of things that in that Israeli session that I feel like probably freaked the president out and proved us right. He still went on to not listen to our asks of solidarity and protection. And we were letting him know all of these things that were happening to us, and still nothing. We continue to protest, still nothing. Eventually, a professor tells me that President Lookwood gets a message from the ADL and the Israeli government about reporting us, essentially, so we can get doxxed, right? Ended up finding out that he ignored that, which is good news, but it definitely was very like, what the heck? Now we have like contacting our school. So we know that we put ourselves known. And we eventually get doxxed by just as a club, not as our actual faces, but it was this Israeli media site on Instagram that ends up labeling us as terrorists and Hamas sympathizers and all these nasty words. And we make a campaign to have people report it and shut it down. And then that was so much stuff. Eventually, another professor reaches out to me and says, hey, come to the Senate, the faculty Senate, and says, like, have SJP speak in public comment and stuff. And I do have to highlight, there were a few professors in the political science department that it's 2 women and then one in the women's studies that were really trying to kind of like be like, hey, go do this, like, do this and stuff, trying to help us out, because in a way their voices as professors are limited, especially considering 2 of them are untenured. So they were really trying to like help us out, do stuff like in a very intentional, strategic way, without anybody getting fired, hurt, disenrolled, all of that. It was just very, very tippy toe, and it was very avoiding a lot of like risk, essentially. And it was very, very hard to assess a lot of the things. And I think that we did get very lucky in how a lot of our things that we did ended up, especially because SJP is very well known here in Sacramento to be a part of community actions such as shutting down the Democratic Convention, shutting down the Capitol, things like that. So there was just a lot of risk that we just got luckier, I would say, on. We end up going to the Senate faculty hearing, and this professor is again saying that the treatment towards Palestinians is biased, where the Jewish voices, A, B, C, D, and he's saying all this really Zionist language. And I cannot even remember word for word what he said. I wish I'd written it down. But I ended up yelling out loud because it got me so angry. I called him a Nazi, and then he got really, really upset with that. He made a whole about me, essentially for me to face consequences and for the faculty to essentially apologize to him. Reassuringly, there was faculty members that were protecting me, but the fact that there was this whole professor trying to just target a student, it was just so silly. Like, what are you doing? And there were students that showed up and, you know, stood behind me, which was really, really helpful, and showed the professors like, hey, we have a whole crowd here. And then the doxing trucks started coming up to our campus. We only got sent 2 days in a row and that also started really freaking everybody out, as well with the doxing. People started wanting to essentially like pull out or remove their names in any sort of way. And it started to become really hard as SJP to do certain things when everybody was really freaked out about their face, about their name, all of it. And students were starting to get really freaked out about their grades because a lot of students were in majors that required to have that ex-IDF soldier that I mentioned earlier, and they felt very uncomfortable in his ability to be fair towards them, and they felt like they really had to hide themselves, which is a very uncomfortable feeling when you know you're Palestine, to have to try and fake who you really are, just so that way, you know, you can pass the class, because essentially you're just trying to also get by as a student. Eventually when the ASI resolution passed towards the end of the semester, we did face a lot of backlash for that, about how one-sided it was, how completely anti-Semitic it was. The amount of times we had gotten called terrorists and anti-Semitic in a semester is absolutely insane to me. It would probably fund like 30 students' college tuitions if I had $1 for every time we got called one of those names. It came to a point as well with President Lukewood where we were like, all right, like, you're over here like dancing and boxing and just la-di-dawing, and like it's very obvious you're ignoring us. We've come to you about so many threats. We've come to you about so many issues. We've come to you about lack of representation. We've come to you about administration and ASI making students feel like they don't have autonomy for what they do and needing to just stay neutral. We've come to you about everything, and you're still doing absolutely nothing. We eventually create a list of demands and a paper, and we hand it to him in person. And we post it online, and he accepted this paper himself to our face. And afterwards, we held a protest. Now, in that protest, we were banner dropping off a building, and where we were standing, there's basically a parking garage very close to us, and there was a man in an SUV that comes out, starts yelling all of these really just like racist, you know, anti-Palestinian things to us. And he runs over to his back seat as if he was grabbing a gun, quickly turns back and goes like that. And like in that moment, if anybody were to go and see that video or was there in person, everybody genuinely thought this guy was about to shoot the place up. And I don't understand why anybody would think it was sane to do something like that. All that was running in my head in that moment was, oh my God, these students would have gotten shot up in the name, because of SJP. And so there was just so many instances where it just really stressed us out as students. It really, really did. Because
Sarah, If I could jump in. Sorry, I don't want to like cut anyone off. I know these are definitely like very real experiences, but I also want to make sure our other panelists have some time to speak. Too, was there any like last minute like comments or anything you'd like to share to the group in addition to what you've already shared?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm so sorry. I should ask for time clarity before as well. I'm so
No,
sorry.
you're totally fine. You're totally. We're so grateful to everything you've shared with this space. Like these are very real experiences. And real quick, going back earlier on in Farrah's timeline, you heard that Sac State mobilized on October 7th. I'm sorry, the 12th, 5 days after the 7th. So the scare tactic that CSU Long Beach tried to use to intimidate students from organizing around this matter didn't work. We are badass and we organize around it anyway. And Sac State and FETA, head of SJP, definitely showed that at every step. Thank you so, so much again. Last comments before I kick it over to Dee?
No, nothing. Just that like this what we do might be scary, but people rely on us to be the voice and they'll stand behind you as long as you let them know that in numbers you are strength. And don't back down about what you believe, obviously. Because numbers win. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're gonna ratio them. If y'all don't know, it's just Gen Z for majority. Thank you so much again, Feta, and for these are very real experiences, not just our own, but also our community that we're working with. So thank you for being comfortable and vulnerable enough for the sake of this panel, for the sake of the movement. I'm gonna pass over to Dee, another super, super amazing panelist with here. Dee, take it away.
Oh, too kind. Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement, and I I graduated from UCLA June 2023, so I was the campaigns director for SJP. Honestly, I want to offer what can be helpful in this session. I think a lot of this speaks for itself. I also think that ultimately each organization needs to make the call on how to move based on their conditions and based on the level of repression that they're feeling, that they're experiencing on their campuses, and so I'm definitely not here to tell anybody how to organize, right? Or how to think about things. I would say more, if anything, that I can help with, it's like regrounding us, and really emphasizing the importance, and it's come up a lot today, of like this collective strength, and being very organized and being very systematic, honestly, with the enemy that's before us, which is Zionism, and also the enemy or the opponent of like the school administrations. They have an arsenal, and so in order to effectively combat these forms of repression, um, in order to actively pressure them, and really damage their image, it takes a lot of organization, and a lot of tact. And I think, this is Cal State students here, continuing to build the connections across campuses would probably be very effective, especially in exposing the CSU, and really getting them for not adhering to all of these values they supposedly abide by, and they are extremely problematic. So, I mean, with that being said, I have some slides, really more for visual, because this is not a teach-in, that I can share if it's useful. I don't know.
Yes, please do, if you're
Okay.
comfortable.
Yeah, that's fine. And it's more of just like a visual aid while I talk. How do I? Okay, you can see that clearly. I hate that it makes it full screen and I can't see my notes. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So, I start off So yeah, these are actually, and these slides are pretty eclectic because they're pulled from different presentations that PYM has done. Specifically, PYM just held this last weekend a retreat for the SoCal SJPs, which is a coalition, UC and CSU students, and I think some community colleges, if they're organized, and or like, you know, like official orgs. Sometimes it's harder with community colleges because they're more like commuter schools. Anyway, so you know, I think we got really good turnout there, and I hope you know, PYM wants to continue and has been continually showing up for the last few years. One of our central focuses is empowering students, and that is because of how important the student movement really is, and how much students have been a part of the movement for liberation in Palestine. And that's why you see GUPS on the screen, the General Union of Palestine Students, which became a very large transnational org and even became a part of PLO. And this was pretty soon after the 1948 Nakba. And so this was largely, you know, Palestinians in exiles and in exile, and also other Arab students who are also all affected by Zionism, right? Because it was really changing the region and shifting the power in the region and inflicting violence all over the region. So fortunately, the Palestinian liberation movement at large has gone through a lot of ebbs and flows because of severe amounts of repression, a lot of geopolitical fracturing, diplomatic developments, right? Where basically all of this decision making is like out of the hands of the people, unfortunately. And of course, continued loss of land, continued increasing normalization with the state of Israel, even from other Arab countries. And so the movement for Palestine now is like still answering to this call and is still continuing this legacy of like a continually fragmented political movement. But at this point, you know, we're at a different point now, right? Where Palestine has really reached every screen, every campus, every mind. And there's also a unity in analysis across demographics, groups, locales like we've never seen. And, you know, GUPS and pretty much every major organization for the movement in Palestine has been rooted in this internationalism, right? So even as students, you are partaking in this movement, and that movement is challenging colonialism at large, imperialism at large, and neoliberalism. And so in many ways, these struggles abroad and locally of our different communities are very much interconnected. And we're seeing everyone really make those and feel those connections today. So there's a lot of like we need to meet the moment, basically. And you know, so universities have always been a site of protest, right? Across demographic, across issues. You know, students are reaching a point, heightened political consciousness, but also really finding their political voice. And at the same time, they've been sites of really heavy repression, policing, violence, right? Like we've seen a lot of that in our history. And you know, there's a lot of reasons for this, and I think a lot of them are self-evident. But you know, universities are not independent, especially state universities, right? Cal State's UCs, they're not independent of the state, and they still serve to uphold the status quo, right? Universities also have an image to protect, you know, for donors, for future students, etc. And they have a lot of interest to protect. You know, unfortunately, even our public universities operate like businesses where they have multi-million, multi-billion-dollar investment portfolios. so, you know, anything that affects this cash flow or like this operation of the university, of course, is going to raise a flag. Of course, it's going to be repressed. And if you think about it, like with the time, place, and manner charges, like why is it so heavily repressed when you interrupt business as usual? You know, like because you're getting in the way of production. So yeah. But so part of this slide too is to emphasize that like students do hold power. You do inherently possess political power. And one of the core ways to do that, or like one of the grounding principles, I guess you can say visions, is to really try to damage the image and legitimacy and the reputation of these universities and impacting these financial flows, which again, there's like heavily sanctioned, but there's ways to go about that tactfully. Yeah, so, and again, we've talked a lot, and I mean, I'll get into it a little bit more later in the presentation. But, you know, all of you have unfortunately faced pretty severe forms of repression, and people have, like, these aren't, you know, fake threats. These aren't, it's not nothing, you know? And so, I mean, unfortunately, taking on this role as organizers comes with anticipating some of these consequences. And it takes sacrifice. That doesn't mean that you can't make calculated sacrifices, though. And, you know, I think like for campuses that have experienced a lot of repression, and have been targeted directly and like have been identified, there's different ways to, you know, like there's stages when we talk about building campaigns, there's stages of escalation and there's stages of consolidation. And obviously this moment is different because everything is very urgent and moving very fast. You know, it's a full genocide unfolding and it's only escalating. But at least on your campuses, there are different ways to still build up the movement. And so it's not always these public facing large scale demonstrations that are going to achieve your goal. It also takes building up your organization's capacity, power mapping, base building, which it'll define in the other slides. But like having these moments to more concretely assess, like, what are you in capacity for? So not necessarily doing less, but maybe doing things differently, differentiating your tactics, right? And again, I'm not gonna teach anybody how to organize, but what typically helps in building up an organization, in delegitimizing or isolating your enemy, in trying to spread your politics and your analysis, is building a campaign. And campaigns can look a lot different, right? It could be very specific to your context. It could be related to divestment. It could be related to it's like something more specific where it's like, you know, inviting these Zionist speakers or the forms of repression against students. Having though like a specific target or a specific person, right? Because this makes this like forces you to make your demands very tangible. And it also helps bring more people into the org because they kind of see a clearer vision, right? Especially if we're talking about like fear tactics and stuff like that. A lot of students may still feel scared to, you know, continue organizing or to even start. And I think having a focused campaign helps people see exactly where they'll have impact. It kind of helps them see where they can have more of a role. And so it like puts things into focus, instead of just this more like feeling of disarray and uncertainty, you know? And yeah, these are just some like concrete ways of kind of like it's a step-by-step process. And I also wanted to say, like, if your SJP or other orgs like if you are wanting to pivot the way that you're going about action related to Palestine, then like, you know, PYM has a lot of resources and you can reach out to me directly after this if you're needing more support on that front. But yeah, I think another important point too, and it sounds like the organizations here do have solidarity, right, across organizations and with faculty. And that is extremely important, especially when you're facing repression. You should never, I mean, in any capacity, even outside of this moment, you should never be organizing alone. You should never be taking the brunt of the repression. You shouldn't be responsible for always being the public facing person. And it becomes really hard to strategize and to sustain the movement if it's, you know, an individual or individuals organizing. And so, especially for like smaller campuses or smaller organizations, it's important to invest time in, you know, partnering with community orgs that have an existing activated base of people, they have influence, partnering with them for campaigns or for events or for propaganda. And yeah, I also think when we're talking about safety, moving safely, this is a really critical part of all organizing across the board. And, you know, organizing for Palestine, even speaking about Palestine, has been very heavily scrutinized our entire history, right? This is not new. And I will say that the organizations that are really able to carry out their work right now, it's because they had all of this institutional memory and a very structured way of going about things that allowed them to kind of meet the moment, you know, that really helped. And one of those things is framing around safety. So it's not security, right? It's not self-repression. It's not, you know, what it's about is ensuring the sustainability of the movement, right? You're always grounding yourself in the collective. About building trust and legitimacy within your community. So like we kind of talked about this here, but you want your community to feel safe coming to your mobilizations, right? And so having systems in place to ensure that, you know, for example, like arrests are minimized when there's not supposed to be arrests, I should say, right? And, you know, the importance of safety too, and again, having these measures in is to not give into scare tactics, the scare tactics on behalf of institutions and also Zionist scare tactics. Because as we've seen, as students have mentioned here, the ADL was mentioned multiple times, Anti-Defamation League, they have influence over our institutions. And I mean, that's crazy, right? And that's why we have to really collectively challenge and pressure these policies, because we have to kind of make a stand against these tactics and say, like, they're not going to work. They have no place here. But again, this is done on a collective level. And it's something that they've done throughout our whole movement, right? Also, side note, like if you're planning like direct action mobilizations, I'm sure like most of you do this already, but you have to have a safety team in place. You have to have designated roles and that accountability and training so that you can tactfully, you know, execute the action. You can, you know, de-escalate if there's a form of escalation that could, you know, result in heavier consequences against students. I would, especially for students that are facing like doxing and direct harassment, if just, again, that's an important emphasis, is to have that safety team. And having that training beforehand. And then just with like risk assessment, right? Like we do need to move, we need to respond to the moment. But I guess in assessing how to move as an organization, always ground it in the vision of your org or the vision of your campaign, and always assess concretely how will this action contribute to the movement or move it forward, right? And that's what I mean by calculated risks. And so it looks different. It's not always like this huge public facing thing. There's just a lot of different facets to this and a lot of different ways you can define political goals. Yeah, so I hope that all makes sense. But another word, I wanted to say something about administration. You know, this expecting you to give prior notice and not using amplified sound, obstructing walkways, go to free speech zones, like it speaks for itself, but this is very counter-revolutionary. You know, like what if an action is not like spontaneous or disruptive or confrontational, what really is the point? And even if they have these time, place, and manner policies in place, like Angel Marie was talking about, they don't have defined and they can't justify this very heavy levels of repression, including very heavy policing and surveillance. The last thing I want to say on administrative charges, like John was mentioning, there's no mention of Palestine. And I think a very large part of this is, of course, because it's not like sanctioning these events is not supposed to do with subject matter. So, you know, to include Palestine would make it discriminatory and therefore like unlawful and unconstitutional. So they think they're covering their bases, right? And so, I mean, that's why, right? In this instance, for example, if you know your action was for Palestine and they get you for this charge, they're not mentioning it, they're being vague about the charges. That, for example, can be a point for propaganda, right? And that's what, you know, these our student groups are increasingly doing, which is just blasting it, right, on social media, having allies, right, also share it, faculty, allies really share it. And so I just think, yeah, even in these moments of repression, or even when your organization might not have the capacity to do something as direct or forward facing, propaganda is a really important tool to still continue contributing to the movement, to still execute the goals that you've established for your org, and to really collectively target the university and target these policies. Yeah, so sorry, I kind of went through things really quick. But just and if you have any questions, I know we're like at time. So just closing remarks, like personal safety is very important, but always ground yourself in the fact that like nothing we're experiencing will ever come close to what the people we're defending are experiencing right now. And, you know, being repressed by your university is very scary. But use that as a tool because you know, universities still give you an easier way to consolidate people, to run an organization in a lot of ways, because you already have people in the same physical location, a lot of like-minded people, all of that kind of stuff. So try to use that to your advantage in a sense. And, you know, Palestinians, like all of the universities in Gaza have been bombed, and Palestinians in other parts of Palestine, like the West Bank, they can't go to school. Schools have been closed. And this is a tactic that has been used our entire history, right? It's really eroding the social fabric. So anyways, my point being that like, there's ways to move about this smartly, but like don't do it alone. And like our community partners, Stop at LAPD Spying say, build power, not paranoia. That is really what's going to continue to move us forward and pressure and challenge and delegitimize the enemy. and really target Zionism and like strip it of this power that it has on our institutions and on our communities. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. But yeah, if you guys have any closing remarks, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much, Dee. Thanks, Angel Marie, too. And everybody, Farah, Akhila saying, who had to dip here, and everybody who stuck this out. I know that this will get a lot of views after we put it on our wherever we're going to put it, YouTube or Instagram. This is absolutely essential, I think, to document these things, to have these discussions. And while I would never pressure any student to do anything that made them feel unsafe, I am very much of the opinion that we need to talk about this out in the open. They want us to cower. They want us to back away, to just shut our mouths, to not say anything, to quit our organizations, to turn our organizations into other appendages of the university. That it's not going to happen. And I'm so deeply proud of the people, of every single one of you who have been part of this movement, and every single person, one of our allies or other members of these organizations, that various SJPs around CSU, La Fuerza, MECHA, SQE, Black Student Union, and I'm sure there are many, many others. And I'm sure this is, only the first time, not quite the first time, but one of the earlier times of our combined meetings of linking up student activists around the CSU, around California, around the nation, and importantly, around the world, right? There's no reason we can't talk to people elsewhere in other countries, right? No matter what any of our leaders in any positions tell us, we can put this on ourselves at any point, and I think we need to continue to do this work. I want to highlight what Dee said towards the end there, that as much repression, which is deep, very real, it's very real, right? The threats are real, the doxing is real, the brutality from police and the assaults from police, very real, right? The injuries that are incurred from them are very real. But we also have to keep in perspective that we are living here in the United States, and we are not facing even a fraction of what is students in Palestine and in other places in this world are also facing. So let's keep that in mind moving forward. And so we did go a little long here. That's okay. I would rather do nothing else than this. But I'll open it up for Q&A. Let's say, let's not go too long, but let's say 3 to 5 questions at most. We'll try to wrap it up in around 10 minutes. And please just raise your hand, or you can go ahead and put it in the chat if you have a question. That's fine too. And I'll prioritize people who weren't part of the panel just to begin, just in case. If not, totally cool. Angel Marie, go for it.
It was more a comment. I'm sorry. It's not a question. It's just a comment, like trying to encourage more questions. A consistent theme that you saw in all of our shared stories today is that the only support we have is each other. So I'm very, again, grateful to share this space with all the folks who are in here and to continue sharing this space as we continue to do this work despite the repression, to also double echo Dee's point, put in perspective, it's nothing compared to what is happening in Palestine and other places in the world. That was all. Thank you.
All right, so we have a question from Nadine, and I know that because she's sitting next to me in the room, but she's on her own computer, so I'm going to let her go ahead and ask that.
Happen as I cross the line.
Okay, so Nadine is asking about the students who have faced this sort of repression and discipline and anything else that's been shared here. Do you have a way of taking legal action against the university, your specific campus, the university system, or whomever as an option? Not sure if any, if any of you can answer that, but.
So I actually am taking legal action against the university. As we all saw my visuals earlier, there are very clear, obvious violations of so many laws. And that's just what I share in this space. There are many others. So yes, to answer your question, I am taking legal action because the nature of my work and the way it blew up and went so viral, a lot of my legal team is actually made up from lawyers from across the country who just caught whiff of it and reached out to me because of the publicity. But also because of that, the lawyers are kind of doing it more for a publicity sort of way, and they're not really about this legal pursuit the way I need them to be. So I'm actually in the process of trying to switch lawyers right now. But yes, legal action is possible, and we are taking legal action against these violations.
Thank you for that answer, Angel Marie. I will ask a question from Robert from CSUN in the chat here. What kind of role does art play in this struggle? I'm not sure if maybe Farah or anyone else might be able to take that.
Oh, I have a lot to say about this one, but I'll cut it short. Art is in every way, it's the only form that, you might be able to censor us, you might be able to try and silence us or keep us off the streets, but you cannot keep art from being produced. And art in so many ways throughout history, throughout existence of humankind, throughout history of resistance movements, is the means of political expression. And something for myself, even that I put up on all over my walls, is this art of resistance. The watermelon, the kofia, everything stops becoming a simple object or a simple color and starts becoming a representation of steadfastness, of discipline, of pro-human rights, of pro-life, of anti-colonialism, of the belly of the beast, of what imperialism is, and bourgeoisie versus proliferate. Sorry. So art is very essential to also unifying people and providing a means of expressing the movement.
Beautifully put, Farah. Couldn't agree more. That's stuff. They can't take that away from us. Dee, go for it.
I have another point about art. Art in the movement is propaganda, right? So it's a really effective means of, and should always be geared toward sharing your analysis, and agitating the masses. And the goal of propaganda is ultimately to have the masses or your base people take up your slogans and basically reproduce your analysis and your messaging, right? That's how you're building the movement and also building support and spreading the movement. So it's just like another arm of that, right? And so propaganda looks like a lot of different things, right? And that includes all of the political posters in our history, where the messaging is very clear. So it's a very critical part of any movement, art in that respect.
Thank you, Dee, for that analysis. I definitely also agree. Art can be used not just as what our capitalist overlords might make it seem like, right? This is just an escape for us. No, it's not. It's more powerful than that. It could root us in our movements, right? And it has historically. Any other questions here? I have a question. This is a pretty basic question. Are we going to stop doing this? Nah. It was even maybe a rhetorical question. Right? Like, we need to be there for each other through this. This is hard work. We need to be dedicated and committed to it. But as I said earlier, I'd rather be no other place than sitting in a classroom on the campus of Channel Islands, talking a little shit about the university system and about their repressive techniques against our students. Keep your eyes open. In the future, we will have, in the coming month-ish, maybe we will have a similar panel for faculty repression. And we also, in March, CFA is putting on what is called the Equity Conference. It is a virtual, it's done virtually this year, and we will be doing this panel as half of a panel that Pam is putting on, which will be on student and faculty repression for their actions in line with the movement for Palestine. And as I said, we won't be silenced. We will continue to not be silenced, and we will continue to speak out against these things. I guess maybe I'll end it by saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Don't be afraid to say it, or even yell it, through a bullhorn at an administrator on your campus. Thank you all so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.